If you're running A/B tests on your website, I need you to stop what you're doing right now and watch this video. Here's why. Most companies are running experiments completely wrong. They're just throwing A/B tests at the wall and hoping that something sticks, without any kind of strategy. I've analyzed over 1,500 experiments for various e-commerce companies, and I can tell you one thing. Those that do random testing typically see win rates of approximately 15% and sometimes even way below that. But when you apply the framework that I'm going to show you in this video, your win rate can jump from 15 to say 33% and sometimes even higher than that. I've seen that multiple times with companies that are applying this framework I'm going to show you in this video. And even better, the average impact per winning experiment typically more than doubles. And you're going to go from, say, 1.7% to something like 2.5% impact per experiment that you're running. In this video, I'm going to show you the exact framework we use to achieve these results, helping you move from random ad hoc testing to a more strategic approach for experimentation that actually drives business growth. And this will work whether you're just starting out with experimentation, you're already running experiments but not really seeing any results, or you have an active experimentation program and want to scale that up and bring it to the next level. Let me show you how strategic experimentation actually works, and let's jump right into my screen.
So if you don't know me yet, I'm Niels. I'm a consultant and founder at 3Tech. We're working with a range of clients, typically in e-commerce, but also some SaaS companies and some insurance businesses, streaming platforms, etc., helping them build up their experimentation program, but also optimize existing programs, and so on and so forth. In this talk today, I want to share one framework that I deem very fundamental for systematic experimentation, which is basically helping us create more learnings. And at the end of the day, what we all care about as well is more impactful results. Just as a little case study to give some context, obviously these examples are not representative necessarily because every company is different. And for example, if you're starting out, this might look very different compared to when you're already at a later stage. But for example, we had one client with whom actually we still work, and they started with a win rate of approximately 15%. And through applying this framework of strategic experimentation, we were able to help them go from 15 to 33%, I think it was, which approximates to about 120% of increase in their win rate. Obviously, this doesn't translate to like they increase their conversion rate or whatever it is by that amount, but we're talking about win rate, right? So this means you run 100 experiments, 15 of them win initially, and potentially after applying this framework, you will have 33 experiments per 100 winning. And when we talk about winning experiments, we specifically mean experiments that resulted in a positive statistically significant result. And that's one of the things we care about at the end, because then we can look at driving more growth and driving more impact. Another case study, which is where we were not necessarily just looking at increasing the amount of experiments they were running and making sure the win rate was increasing, but also because they were a bit smaller, we were able to help them increase the average impact of experiments. This means that the experiments were stronger based on more evidence, and we'll look at why that might be the case later. And yeah, just make sure that we could have more impactful experiments, and they ended up with an average impact of approximately 2.5%, whereas before it was 1.7% average impact. That is on statistically significant and positive changes, experiments only. So I think this is a good time to start. I'm probably not the presenter of hearts here, so I'm just going to go through this in a more leisure fashion. And basically, when we're looking at, and I was initially telling you, ad hoc versus strategic experimentation, there's just the elephant in the room, and I want to get it out of the way as early as possible. Most experimentation efforts, even if there is some kind of strategy, they are ad hoc and typically lack alignment with business strategy. And Well, one of the big problems here is that, and you see this on LinkedIn, you see this on other places as well. Um, People are like, yeah, but isn't testing alone enough? Because everybody's preaching, yeah, try to test everything. And at the end of the day, you'd think probably that that's enough, but it is indeed not the case, because if we do test the wrong things, are not able to show enough impact over time, especially in larger organizations, but also in small ones where maybe there is not a huge budget for experimentation and CRO, people will just lose interest. They will certainly lose trust if you're not able to bring in the wins that will eventually fund your program, right? So what is necessary here is that in order to bring those wins, you need to make sure that your efforts, and this is your experiments at the end of the day, but also the research that goes into it, is aligned, or they are aligned with your business goals. And well, at least at the end of this webinar, right, in this webinar, we will look at how you can do that and how you can make sure that you are, and this is already a hint, you're solving the right problems. So what's missing in experimentation strategy? As I said, isn't testing already enough? Well, in testing, in experimenting, we've got the one component, and that's, yeah, simply running the tests. But then we also have strategy, which is the composure here, experimentation strategy, and that is typically what's missing. So the problem without a strategy, I think most of you can kind of guess strategy in general, even if we don't look at experimentation in particular. There is typically randomness. Like the actions you take, they're more or less not unidirectional, but like in going in all directions. Goals shift. If you see you can't move the needle here, then you'll try to move the needle there, and the week after it will look different once again. The wins you might produce are meaningless typically because they lack purpose. They will drive maybe short-term growth or bring some short-term benefit, but it is very hard to productize these wins over time and really make sure they find way into the product. There's, as I said, lack of purpose. Without strategy also, it's hard to bring teams together to work in the same direction. So without strategy, collaboration is becoming harder and harder and harder. And all of that at the end of the day also leads to typically a lack of buy-in. So a lot of reasons why the need for strategy is more prominent than ever, especially if you're trying to get more buy-in for experimentation, or if you're trying to grow the program and not just maybe run 1 or 2 tests per month or per year or whatever, right? So we'll go, if I can click here, to the next slide and look specifically at what sets ad hoc testing apart from, or rather what sets strategic experimentation apart from a more ad hoc approach, or actually the outcome of being more ad hoc, right? So in strategic experimentation, we are very proactive, right? We're not just reacting to whatever is coming up. We don't have to necessarily react to, oh, our conversion rate's down, now we need to somehow fix something, but we're more proactive. We have a strategy that we want to push forward, and with that, don't have to react to any kind of metric going up or down, or crises that come up in the business. Well, there is still that, just as a side note, of course, crises will come, but even for that, in strategic experimentation, we have ways of catching them earlier, because there's already again a hint, looking at solving the right problems that matter to the company, and at the end of the day, the customers and clients that we're working with. So another one is that we typically have these goals align with our overarching, or like the efforts align with our overarching business objectives. And I'll go into specifically how that looks later, but with ad hoc testing, what you typically see is people find an idea here or there, or maybe somebody has seen something somewhere else, But that typically doesn't align with objectives, right? You might be looking at, oh, this drove X% conversion rate increase for company Y, but how does that actually impact our business, our customers? And this already brings us to the next one. In strategic experimentation, we're looking at leveraging real customer insights and not just something that we've seen with other companies that worked in solving problems for other companies and their customers' problems, but that worked for our company in particular. So you can see how all of this ties together. So I'm just going to try to go through it fairly quickly. And in strategic experimentation, if experiments fail, which they will, the majority of experiments fail, you will find and have a way of being able to iterate on these experiments instead of just having to write them off as failed experiments and then look for the next shiny object, right? So at the end of the day, if we have experiments that basically can't fail, this is a topic in of itself, we also have the entire org, or the entire org will step by step have an interest in learning, right? Everybody who is contributing ideas, is contributing insights, will help the company, the experimentation program move forward. Whereas, for example, in most scenarios in ad hoc testing, there might be like 2-3 people, maybe sometimes even a single person responsible for driving things like conversion rate. They might be running tests on their own, and there is no knowledge exchange and no way for other members of the organization to contribute ideas. Which, if you look at it as just a single thing, might not mean much. But if you look at an experimentation program working at large and driving growth for the entire organization, you can basically see how having a more strategic approach and a systematic approach, and specifically in that case, is relevant for driving growth and making sure everybody's involved. And then the next one here specifically is in a more ad hoc testing approach. People just look at typically, did the experiment win or not? Probably then disregard the result if it was not a winning test, and don't really try to understand the results, right? People don't really look at the results, try to understand why did this not work, or why did it work even with winning experiments, but people try to understand it on a far deeper level. They try to segment down the results. They try to look for clues, not in the way that they try to find wins necessarily, but try to understand how their initial hypothesis might be faulty or otherwise, right? And the big question here that people always ask is why? Why did that work? Why didn't it work? What was driving the behavior that customers at the end of the day were showing? And this is one of the reasons why, or that in a strategic experimentation context, that really helps. Because at the end of the day, all of that funnels back into creating better ideas, creating better experiments, and more sound hypotheses. All right, so 1 second, I'm just fixing my chair here. So the last one, and then we'll also stop this side-by-side comparison. We'll have enough time to look at more specifics later. A well-defined experimentation process, right? This is probably one of the cornerstones of strategic experimentation in an operational sense. Because with a more ad hoc testing approach, some experiments take like 5 minutes in planning, others take like hours or days or weeks. With the experimentation process in place, typically that we have a range, of course, of complex, less complex, and very simple experiments, but typically the amount of planning from test to test is very similar because we have a process that takes away a lot of complexity. So that was the comparison. I was just looking here myself. And now let's get into experimentation strategy. And as you can probably tell, there is a lot more to to strategic experimentation than what we can cover in, say, a 25, 40-minute talk. So here we'll look at one cornerstone of strategic experimentation, which we call strategic opportunities. And you can already see opportunities is maybe leading into the direction of looking at solutions. So basically, strategic opportunities guide the way to solve relevant problems. And if you remember, I was talking about solving customer problems before. So here we are with relevant problems, and we will see how that, how a strategic opportunity is comprised. There's three core components. We have a company strategy, a business outcome, what we at the end of the day want to achieve, and then we have a customer problem. And I think at first we will look at the company strategy. And while, of course, this would be enough to have an entire talk about just company strategy, I know this is not why you came here, but it's basic. The basics of a company strategy is trying to understand and having it written down somewhere where your company wants to go, what its mission is, how growth works, and this is in terms of acquisition, retention, etc. But generally also, how does product grow, right? And again, this could be its own workshop. I will leave it at that, but make sure you have a solid and well-founded understanding of your company strategy, because if you don't have that, there is no reason whatsoever, or no way whatsoever to be able to run experiments that move your company forward. Second one was customer problems, and the reason why it's not business impact or business goals. I'm not sure what I called it actually here. Business outcome actually. Business outcome that is next is because I think customer problems are driving business outcomes at the end of the day. So here's our second component. We need, in order to have or create a strategic opportunity, which by the way, we can have a set of strategic opportunities. We need to understand what customer problems we can be solving and prioritize these problems first. So there's two sources of customer problems. You might be able to come up with more, but typical ones are problems that are identified by users, and they might tell them to you via customer support. They might rage and go on about them in comments, in customer reviews. There's various sources, but basically customers telling you, or that customers identifying the problems and somehow making you aware of them, if you want it or not. And then there's problems that are identified by data. You might see in user behavior that people don't understand your product, or that people are no proper way of using your product. There's various ways how you can see that in data. But typically, you'd want to look into your web analytics or other sources of data and try to see inconsistencies with expectations and what's actually happening, right? So problem statement template, save this for later, or take a screenshot or something. Basically, we want to understand the customer problem. So we need to have a description of the actual customer impact, the customer specifically. So we're talking customer segment. This could be women below 40 that have used a competitor product, for example. Then how that problem negatively impacts the growth model. So is it in terms of retention, acquisition? Where in the growth model does that problem lie, and how negatively does it impact the growth model? And then we also need to come up with a reasoning about the cause. Here you can, of course, come up with reasons yourself. Typically, especially if it's coming from a more qualitative source, you might already gain some understanding of the why it matters, or rather, why is that happening? And if you have ever, which I assume if you're running experiments for a bit longer, have done so, then if you've ever created or written a hypothesis, you will be very familiar with this kind of problem statement template. because it's in a similar fashion, except we're not looking at a solution, or not, at least not just yet, but we're looking at how a problem is defined, and you can use these two, not interchangeably, but yeah, as a frame of reference. Then a little home task. I mean, this made more sense in the presentation that I was giving, but please take some time and then write down at least 5 existing customer problems, if you have them, which I assume you do, and keep this list handy. Maybe not just on a piece of paper. This could be a start, but also make sure you then, once these 5 customer problems are defined, that you make sure to also share them in your organization in a central place where people regularly bump into it. Make it part of your all hands or something. Maybe not every week, but like regularly enough, so people are aware of the problems that they are solving or looking to solve. And then, yeah, feel free to use this problem statement template to write these customer problems. And yeah, at the end of the day, the bigger the problems you solve, the higher the return will be. Specifically, we're talking about customer problems, right? So third component, getting back to, we had first the business strategy, you have customer problems, and when they have a big business outcome. First, let's look at some specific metrics that we can use to track the outcome of experimentation, because we might be like, oh, we want to increase customer satisfaction. Typically very hard to track with experimentation, but it is an outcome for sure. Descriptive metrics, right? We have intermediate metrics. Sorry, descriptive metrics might be something like, oh, somebody clicked on a button, right? Doesn't really mean anything. Or in intermediate metrics, we might have something, oh, somebody put something into the cart, which is not really a business outcome yet. But when we look at outcome metrics, and this is what we want in order to have these strategic opportunities, is something like, oh, revenue generated, average revenue per user, right? Something that will drive growth for us. Intermediate metrics, add to cart, for example, or continuation to checkout. Even though we might use them later as also intermediate metrics, this is not necessarily driving business outcome on its own. So make sure you select the right metrics. And if you haven't done this yet, also we have a workshop on how to select the proper metrics. And I think I'll make a video about this sometime soon. And select proper metrics, how to come up with a metrics tree, and yeah, just make sure you also understand how your business is comprised and what kind of metrics have impact on your business outcome. So, strategic opportunity. It's been already 24 minutes almost. And we will, as you can see here, is a strategic opportunity number 12. So this is just to show that we can create more than one. You should create more than one. I typically advise to create at least 3. So you also have a bit of playing room and not putting all eggs in one basket. And then, yeah, let's get started. Company strategy. I would try to summarize company strategy and growth model in 1 to 2, 3 sentences, max. Keep it as short as possible, but precise and concise enough so people quickly understand and get back on their feet in terms of where we headed and why this matters even. And sometimes it also makes sense with creating strategic opportunities to already either like copy company strategy from one strategic opportunity to the next, but also sometimes it makes sense to maybe highlight a specific aspect of the growth model that is relevant for the strategic opportunity and the key outcome metric that you selected. Next, you define the customer problem. Remember that list you made of at least 5 problems. Take the most pressing one for the first strategic opportunity, put it here. Second strategic opportunity, take the second most important one. And yeah, what, who, where, why. Just write it down here. And that is that. Next, outcome metric, just put the metric there and maybe a sentence of how that's being tracked as part of an experiment. And then we can create an overarching hypothesis. This part I haven't talked about yet, but it's basically writing a hypothesis for this specific strategic opportunity. For example, by solving the customer problem A, identified by insight B, we will see an increase in outcome metric C because D, right? So we have the reasoning from the customer problem, we have the key outcome metric that we have, we see we have all the things in there. In terms of alignment, in terms of what we want to do, in terms of what problem we want to solve. But it is very important to not think in terms of, oh, we're going to change wording on a specific button or anything like that. This is not relevant here because, this is just a strategic opportunity which will later then be transformed into maybe 5, 10, 20, 30 tests that can be more on be more specific. This is just an opportunity and one of maybe 3 that we can select later when we go and work on stuff. All right, next steps, because you probably haven't yet done all of these things, make sure you align and reflect on the company strategy. Just make sure it's written down somewhere, just like the customer problems, because that's the next thing. Make sure you create this list that I mentioned, 5 customer problems that you'll be focusing on. Of course, this list can change over time, especially if you're earlier in your product development process. Maybe you haven't yet found product market fit and all these kind of things. These problems can change, but make sure you keep a list handy and add problems to that. Throw some away if they don't matter anymore, or maybe you've solved it. And then make sure you map your metrics. I think I talked about quickly a metrics tree. If you haven't created a metrics tree yet, do so. There is plenty of resources out online. I will add a resource here myself shortly. And then for the strategic opportunities specifically, cluster your metrics into descriptive, intermediate, and outcome. And from the outcome metrics, choose one that makes sense in terms of solving that customer problem. And third, this is the last step, create the strategic opportunities. Basically bring all these things together, use the template I showed here to create your strategic opportunities, and then I guess start working on it, putting it into action. We now know where we're headed. We know that we solve real problems, because what do? We have a strategy, or we know our company strategy. We know the business outcomes we want to be driving. We know the customer problems that we should be solving. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, however many strategic opportunities that we now can use as a guide towards meeting our goals. Only now, and this is the step, once you've done all these things, does it make sense to think about specific solutions and specific tests. But this is probably what you're most interested in anyway. Once you have that, you can get going.
Now you have the complete framework for strategic experimentation that actually drives results. Remember, throwing random tests at the wall isn't a strategy. Real growth comes from aligning your experiments with business goals and solving actual customer problems. And if you're ready to implement this framework in your business, but want some expert guidance, then click the first link in the video description below to book a free strategy call with me, and we will discuss your specific situation. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.